Hey there, life group leaders. Paul and Karen here again. Looking forward to sharing another great chapter that was in Good to Great. Another chapter that I really enjoyed. I just really connected with his opening thoughts, Karen, as being a guy that loved sports when I was growing up and played a lot of different sports. And, I had dreams of being a Major League Baseball player or an NBA player. I played a lot of basketball in my days growing up.
That was not my dream.
Was not your dream, but it was mine. And it's so funny, once in a while, I'm even watching today, I'll watch a sport and I'll have a little dream of what it would have been like to be a sports star myself. I had those dreams. Dreams are fun. Dreams are great to think about, of looking forward to things that might be coming. I'm always a guy, and you know this in my counseling, when I do counseling with people or just Bible studies with people, I always want to point them towards a hope, a dream, where we can get from where we are on a journey to where we might be.
Right. Your famous word is yet.
Yet. I love that word, that we're not there yet. And so, and that plays out in dreams, dreaming great dreams. I love this idea that for us to dream great dreams. And we did this as a family, didn't we?
Yeah. Let's see, we've been here 2 years and we had a year lag in between there. So about 3.5 years ago, God took our family on this huge dream journey where I had been feeling it in my heart, finally kind of expressed it to Paul, that I think God is saying it's time for us to move on. And that was all I was getting, was it's time to move on. And so
we didn't know what it meant.
We talked about that and started praying about that. And Paul concurred, God's saying it's time to move on. We were at a church. We had been there for 3 years, 2.5 at that point, and just didn't quite know what that meant. And so we just blindly followed this, word we felt we had from the Lord to move on. We told Paul's higher ups that at the end of that season, which was ending in June, that we weren't going to take another church. We were with the Methodist denomination at the time, and we said, don't reappoint us. We don't know what we're doing. We have no idea what God is calling us to, but it's time for us to move on. And so we just spent that entire spring praying and seeking God and begging God and applying for all kinds of different ministry positions. I mean, we weren't just looking at pastorates, we were looking at missions work, we were looking at
chaplaincy type things,
nonprofits, and just all kinds of ministry jobs, and
just trying to discern, trying to figure out, what is this dream?
Right.
Because we just didn't have any idea. It was such a challenging time, a fun time as we look back. It was hard in that time, though.
Yeah, and I think the way that this book kind of made me think back to that. He talked through how God births dreams in his people, and he talked about Abraham, and the principle there was God commands us to step out of our comfort zone. And when we said, okay, we're going to give up this church with absolutely no idea of where we were going, without the covering of the United Methodist denomination anymore, which had been your comfort zone, because that was, Paul had grown up in a Methodist church. That was all he knew. He knew tons of pastors, tons of people within that denomination. And so this was just a huge step outside of our comfort zone. And we really just didn't know where we were going to go. And so, like I said, we just started applying, and doors kept closing and closing. And kind of makes me think of that part, that we'll fail in our attempts to accomplish his dream in our power, because it was almost like we didn't know what we were doing. So we were just fumbling to try and figure it out. And we're just going to apply for anything and everything. And so many of those things were closed doors.
But I think some of what he talked about there is we learn through those failures. Right. And we did. We kept learning more and more what God was calling us to, that, those dreams that he was placing in front of us. Yeah.
And eventually, I was so sure God was coming through in the 11th hour, right? Do you remember that?
Over and over
again. It was up
it.
Until the moment we were moving, and I was so sure that a job was going to happen. And suddenly we had to move out of our parsonage, and we had nowhere. We had no job. We had no home. And so God bless my parents who took us in. But literally, I was convinced God was coming through, and that didn't happen the way that I thought it would. And that's what, God teaches us through adversity to love the dream giver more than the dream. And I think through that next year, then we lived with my parents for a year while we sought God and applied for jobs and waited on him. And I think, to me, that was the biggest lesson through that year. I felt like everything had been stripped from me, just everything. I had no security. My husband didn't have a job. I didn't have my own home. I didn't have my things. And God wanted me to say, but Karen, it is well with your soul. Like
Yeah.
you and me, we're okay. And even if you lose everything else that gives you security on this earth, you have the dream giver.
And that was so huge. I mean, I grew a lot during that time period. I had opportunities to step back and read and to learn about what God had for us, learn about this dream that He's placed in front of us. And so we both struggled with it, but yet we both grew.
And don't you think here it said under the part about Paul, God clarifies our calling in times of crisis. And you went to work in this warehouse, which I was really mad about. I was really mad that my pastor husband, who had this master's degree that took him so much time to get, and he was so good in ministry, and God would have him working in a warehouse moving boxes. I was just really angry about this. I felt like it was such a waste of you. And yet through that time, I think that's when God really did clarify your calling, because we didn't know what we were being called to. And in that time, it was like, you are a pastor.
Yeah.
You are a pastor. And that is definitely what you were going to go back to eventually.
Yeah, and I learned that by being in the warehouse and loving on those people. It didn't matter who the people were, just being with people and shepherding them and loving them. I learned.
And you were the pastor of the warehouse.
I was. It was fun.
Yeah. So I think it's now easy to look back on this and see all of these lessons that God was talking on us. But, eventually it says God puts His dreams in your heart. And, I think it was in about January of our year in the warehouse, so just past halfway, when we saw this posting for the job here as the discipleship pastor.
And it was interesting as we looked at that description, and as Mike and I had that first interaction back and forth, I still remember both you, your mom, your dad, as we looked at what Mike was saying to us, it kept happening over and over. This is exactly what we're called to. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was scary of how it would really just spoke to what we felt my gifting was, my passion was, right, of what you were called to as well. Right.
I remember we sent your letter to Mike. Mike's like, you sound exactly like what we're looking for. He sent a letter back. We're like, this sounds exactly like what we're looking for. I mean, the
dream just fell, opened
just
up.
All the dominoes fell
awesome.
At once, and the doors opened. And Mike shared the rest of that story where, it bobbled for a little while when we didn't know with Billy leaving what was going to happen. But I think that's why you were able to come in and speak to your belief in Mike at that point, is because we were so sure at that time that this is where we were going to end up. We were so sure Mike was going to get that job and you were going to work here because of the way that God just threw open the door and put that dream in our hearts. So,
and the fact that Karen eventually was going to work here as well, mm-hmm, that was part of that dream, that it wasn't just a me thing, it was what God was calling our family to. And that was part of the dream. And it's neat to see where we are.
Yeah. So
Karen, as we think about our journey then, mm-hmm, and we look then, how can we be more specific to what this is? Because we're doing this for life groups. Mm-hmm. And I know that, as we read this, we also had the discussion a little bit of what does this mean then for us as life group leaders? I mean, you lead an individual women's one, I lead a couple men's one, plus we have one together. Mm-hmm. How does this play out? How do we dream within our life groups? And I think that's so important for us to share with you and ask you the question, mm-hmm, what dreams do you have? Mm-hmm. As you are a life group leader? And first, that goes just individually to you, or if you're a couple leading a life group, to you as a couple. How does this play out in your life group? What have you as life group leaders, what's your dream for you in your journey with Christ as you grow in Christ to become better life group leaders? And how does that work with you? And beyond that then, as you look at your life group, what's your dream for your life group? Each of those individuals that are already in your life group. Maybe you'll get some new ones this semester coming up. But what is your dream for each and every one of them? What are your hopes? What are your goals for them? And then also, all the different pieces of being a life group leader, leading in service, leading in communicating with them, leading in the game night, leading all the different parts of being a life group leader. What are your dreams for that?
Right. I think the one thing that you and I had talked about too was Love Gillette projects.
Sure.
And I think that's something that so many of us as life group leaders have just it's a checkbox, right? It's like, okay, well, we're supposed to do a service project, so what are we going to do? Let's pick one from the list and just check it off. And that is an area that we kind of feel like that could be tremendous. Like, what if you lead your group in setting a big, hairy, audacious goal, as
Yeah.
he talks about in here, you know, of just saying, like, what could our group really get behind? And what could we do if God came alongside of us? And that to me is thrilling. It is exciting.
Scary.
And I really would love to see some of your life groups this semester just take on something huge that is so beyond you that God has to show up and make it happen. That would be incredible.
And it could be that maybe your dream is not just being about your life group, but maybe you're saying this is something that's so exciting and bigger than us that you pull alongside another life group and you
Work
come
together.
together and work together. And what a great idea that would be. And also just, you know, another checking off box. How often do we just figure out, okay, what's my icebreaker? You know, Ellie encourages us to do icebreakers. Well, don't just do an icebreaker for the sake of an icebreaker. Know your group. What is going to be the best thing that's going to bring great community into your group? How can you get in interaction with everybody? What's going to bring other people out of their shells that maybe they're struggling with those icebreakers? So dream and pray and do all those things that can help that to take it on another level.
Yeah. In the chapter, he just shared those steps. It was right at the end of the chapter, page 126, where he says, you know, what's the practical process for pursuing a great dream?
Yeah.
And the first step was to write it down. So as you start thinking about yourself as a leader, as you start thinking about the members of your group, as you start thinking about what this next life group season is, get a piece of paper out and start planning and thinking what could happen. Write it down. And it says, once you've done that, read over them.
Over and over again. And
Keep reminding, because if we don't, we tend to just fall back on what's easy, right? Or what's routine, what we've done before. If we don't keep them in front of us, then we're not going to make sure they happen. And then pray over them. You know, if this is God's dream for your group, then you need to be talking to him about it and then watch for his intervention. So just waiting with this tremendous expectancy of, man, what is God going to do? What could he do in our group, through our group, between our members? You know, just to watch for God to do some amazing, amazing things. I cannot wait. Just this chapter makes me so excited for fall life group season.
And the cool thing is the next chapter, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, the next chapter is pray great prayers. So maybe that the next chapter will help come back to this. How do those praying great prayers lead into these dreams that you have for your life group?
Yeah.
I'm excited as well of what, as you as life group leaders, as you continue to grow and dream and pray and look at your life group that God has given you. I mean, this is not you. This is God bringing these people to you so that you can shepherd and lead them. What great dreams then does God have for your life group? And how can you lead into this semester that's in front of you and beyond?
We would love to hear from all of you this week. We really think this is an important chapter. And so if you can just shoot us a short email, it doesn't have to be long, doesn't need to take you long, but once you've taken a few days to process this and to start dreaming for your life group, we'd love to hear just one dream from each of you. Let us know, what are you dreaming? Because we would love to be praying with you for your life group season and for the dreams that God's placing on your hearts.
And we want to share this with Ellie and Jen as they continue to grow our life group ministry.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys have a great week. And next week will be Pray Great Prayers. We're looking forward to that one too.
Bye.